The Business Simplicity Podcast, where leaders share their most successful strategies and the failures that inspired them, so business owners and managers can avoid the suffering and reap the benefits. With your host, Chris Parker.
And welcome back to the Business Simplicity Podcast. This is Chris Parker, and I'm having a conversation again on the podcast with Gerphil Kerkhof. And Gerphil and I worked many, many years ago at LeasePlan. And more recently, in his practice, he's been acting, I guess I would call it, as a life coach for the last year or so, which has been a delightful journey. So the reason for the conversation is inspired by a session we had recently and Movember coming up. And so if people are watching this on video, they will see the mustache coming in well on me. Gerphil has his full beard still. And the question around mental health at work, and Movember, of course, is a charity, a global charity around men's health, mental health, and physical health. For me, I try to expand it to not only men, but just people, but it's a way that I can engage in a fun way. And with Gerphil, and his specialties are around, burnout and ADD and general life coaching, which has been marvelous for me to work with someone who knows me from the past and engage in that way. And so we said, let's just have an open conversation, inspired by Movember, on mental health at work. And the question I want to sort of throw up there is, I oftentimes see people who are really stressed and sometimes overwhelmed and very negatively impacted by change.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that change comes from internal stuff, or maybe they're on, outside of work in their life, or in my current business, we acquire companies, and sometimes we have to change strategies, or maybe the market and competition does stuff, but change is happening all the time. So that's what I'm hoping to wrestle with for the next couple of minutes. But before we jump into that, Gerphil's original podcast was on August 15th, 2020. So I'll put the link to that if people want to go back and hear more generally. But Gerphil, can you share a little bit with us, just to orient, about what is it that you do? And so we can, position that again. And then we'll get into the question of how can people deal with change better in a more mentally healthy way. So share a bit about yourself, Gerphil, please.
Well, what I do is I give therapy. I give coaching to people who are experiencing a burnout and or have ADD, attention deficit disorder. And in both areas, I have personal experience myself. My approach is on the emotional and spiritual level. So connected with the sense of purpose, the sense of self that people have and often have lost. So I help them to get back to themselves with a capital S of self. That's basically what I do.
Yeah. And for me, I think it was, because I'm trying to reflect, when we started talking, was I burnt out? Maybe certainly on the path. Was I, do I have ADD or ADHD? We haven't had that conversation. Some people have accused me of it. I don't know. We'll see. But it was really for me that connection to self that I was seeking, that more spiritual connection to self, and that's been a glorious journey.
Good to hear. I also give coaching and therapy to people who aren't in a burnout and who don't have ADD, because the underlying processes and issues are more or less the same for many people. So dealing with emotional exhaustion, overwhelming emotions, or on the other side, feeling apathic, have lost the connection to their feelings.
Mm.
The approach is always the same. So to reconnect to their bodies, to their emotions, and to what is underneath of that.
Yeah,
that is what you basically do. And what you see when we come to the topic of today, so mental health in business related to change. Change is something that raises attraction, eagerness on one side, and fear on the other side. People are, in general, not keen to have fundamental change all the time. They have also a need to feel at home, to be at peace, to have constancy in their lives, and to have the feeling that they have a capability to be part of the change in terms of being autonomous, which means basically self-directing, so that they are in charge of their piece of the change. And that is often where the issue of chronic stress comes around. So the constancy that people are seeking is the social support that they experience with their peers, with their colleagues, in their networks, in their families, etc. Basically, when that social support, or the feeling of being supported, of being recognized, of being seen, being kind to, when that is in danger, then people start to resist change and experience fear and stress.
And the way I've seen it in my career, maybe it's very similar, but using some different words, that people get really, really stressed out if I guess there's three things. There's if they don't understand or have a view of what's changing. So like if things are surprising and coming out of thin air,
Yeah.
decisions are imposed, and if they have the feeling that they're not able, and you called it autonomy, I would call it more influence. And if they feel that they don't have any ability to influence it, basically they're just being, it's just been imposed on.
True.
And oftentimes when it's just simply imposed on, it's not necessarily what the person wants or needs. So and then the third thing is that social cohesion, that if there is a tribe, or it's incredible what people can deal with if they have a support network, if they can go talk, and in some cases I've been involved in transformations, and it was incredible what happened on the smoking porch back when that was a thing. I was out there a lot, even though I didn't smoke, because that's where the real conversations were having. People were out there venting and sharing and caring, even though it was around a smoking porch.
True.
And yeah,
I've been there too. Yeah.
And I'm also to see it's when those things aren't there, I guess that what happens with people, like what is that the start of the path of burnout and apathy, or
yeah, then you get into the primary stress responses, to fight, to flee, or to freeze. And when they freeze, they withdraw, they become lonely, they become isolated, which is very counter to what people are made for as group animals, basically. So when that happens, people drop out. They drop out mentally.
Yeah.
And we call that around stress research. We call that. I've forgotten the word.
Maybe it'll come.
In some way they become dropouts.
Buzzwords in the market now are things like, the great resignation, and then now quiet quitting is a term we're hearing, that people are still physically there, but just emotionally checked out. And that, oftentimes came through the pandemic. But I can imagine, because, none of us had a view of that. None of us were able to influence it. I just came out of a week of isolation in a hotel that I could influence that. I decided to start Movember early and did some meditation and, did some healing. So I tried to make the most out of it, but it was, and then, completely isolated. It was, that was definitely a thing. I also find it fascinating.
Cynical, by the way.
What's that?
The word that I was looking for is cynical.
Cynical, yeah.
To be a cynic means that you withdraw in the stress research, etc. It means that you emotionally withdraw from the people around you, your clients, your patients, or whatever. That you emotionally withdraw from your work. It depersonalizes to a certain extent. You are not there anymore in an emotional sense.
Well, which I can understand, because if you're there in an emotional sense and you feel whatever's happening is a negative or wrong, then I can imagine that withdrawing emotionally is a great coping mechanism.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I wish I had that coping mechanism myself, because it's one of my, I get very emotionally vested in, the activities and the people I'm in, and when things go differently, or, if these triggers happen, that really can cut me deeply. And and I don't know, for me, I guess that's part of our work that we've been doing is how do you connect to self in order to be more resilient and not so impacted by the conditions around you. So
sure. Yeah.
What's on my mind is how, and the word I want to say is unfair, because when changes and transformations happen, and then someone is reacting negatively, and maybe even exhibiting some mental health symptoms, negative symptoms, I think oftentimes we stigmatize that and say, oh, well, that person can't handle it, or that person's not being professional, and I'm like, wait, this, the system is creating an environment where the normal person will suffer.
Sure.
How is it that person, like, wait, shouldn't we all be pointing our finger at ourselves for creating an environment where someone suffers? I don't know. What do you think?
I think that when you see that colleagues or employees, team members of you become emotional in terms of anger, sadness, fear, withdrawal, you should be there for them and not point at them, because their emotional reactions out of a sense of being out of control and starting to drop out. The worst thing you can do is then point at them.
How do you have tips? Meaning what I do, and I'm sort of inherently and naturally a coach, but when I see people struggling, and oftentimes the signals of that are when other people are pointing and starting to say negative things about that person, that my little spidey sense starts to tingle, and I find myself wandering over there and just checking in and like, well, what's going on over here? How are you doing? And then, after usually a conversation or two, eventually this flood opens up, and there's all of this pain and frustration that comes out.
That is exactly what needs to be done. The person should feel enough safety to express their feelings, to really explore those feelings and express them, and not to be spoken to in a way to get those feelings out of the way as soon as possible, because that won't work. It would suppress the feelings, the emotions, and it will rot into you, basically.
Yeah. Well, do you have tips for people? Because we're not, the typical employee and myself are not, therapists or psychologists or mental health experts. How can the average person be there for others?
I think the first thing is to be curious and engaged in a warm way. So, what is happening with you? How do you feel? Which is a very human thing to do.
It's funny. I love that. It's a very human thing to do, but how rarely is it done in work? It's for some reason,
Yeah.
why is the workplace dehumanized? Not completely, of course. It's all about the individual personalities, but
now we love when employees are passionate about their work.
Yeah.
Then they bring in their personality, the personality of warmth, of interest, of curiosity, etc. But as soon as feelings are more complicated, we don't want to know that. We are only see each other as robots, as workers.
Mm.
And that people don't work in that way. You cannot say, well we like people being enthusiastic and passionate, etc. But we don't like it when these feelings are turned around into anger or fear or sadness or whatever. And people who tend to get burnout happen also to be the most passionate, most engaged people. They get most frustrated, and when they get most frustrated, they're not heard to. They will take that frustration in, and then it turns into hate. Then it turns into apathy, depression, and things like that. So it is very weird that in a lot of corporate cultures, we welcome and stimulate passion, which is a very intense emotion for something abstract like a company. And as soon as somebody gets passionate, but gets frustrated, we forget about him.
Mm.
And that is really sick making.
Yeah. I think we might have spoken about this in the last months, but on my personal journey the last years, I've started to see, and I haven't crafted this in a really clear statement yet, but that these abstract structures called companies are actually vehicles for personal growth.
Mm-hmm.
Because and if we look at the humans involved, also customers and users, but the humans involved,
Mm-hmm.
It's the interaction with other humans that give the opportunities for understanding, growth, conflict,
Mm-hmm.
tension. And these conflicts and tensions are the invitation to reflect, and also to make decisions. Because maybe I agree that I am right and that person's wrong, and then how to maturely deal with that, or actually to reflect within yourself and say, okay, well, maybe my paradigm, my lens, my beliefs are flawed. But that requires a certain type of space, and so that for a company, it's a group of individuals that have decided to come together every day to do something very abstract, and then there's a systemic way of these humans working together.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to transform a company, and it's the only way to do that is actually to embark every one of those individuals on their own journey.
Sure.
But I never hear, can't say never, this isn't how we talk about it. We talk about it like, oh, we set the vision and strategy and everyone passionately follow.
Yeah.
It seems completely upside down.
I think so too. So I think the most successful companies are the companies that see themselves as a learning company, and where you can make mistakes or suboptimal choices, and learn from it. And learning from it as a company also comes with the ability of people to have personal development and to reflect with each other on the personal development. Personal development is about becoming more and more mature as a human being, but also in to feel where your strengths are and where your passion is, where your fun is in working, which talents you want to develop. So the companies that deal with their employees in those senses, as a learning company and as a personal development environment, I believe are the most successful. And that is in particular important in environments like you are working in and I worked in. So companies where you deal with a lot of knowledge workers who need their mind, their creativity as their main energy.
And how often do we, apply ancient management science principles to them as if they're cogs in a machine? It's I don't know. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing to wrestle with on my journey with, the business design framework in Ebullient. What I keep, every time I use it, there's because it's a very intellectual tool. And what I find is actually the meaningful conversation is the emotional undercurrent that comes, so when, facilitating workshops and the other consultants that do it as well, we're starting really to see that it's not so much the intellectual written output. The question is like, well, how emotionally connected are they to what they agree with each other and what they disagree with, and were they able to have those conversations? Were they able to have the space to even state that they disagree? And it's just in general, like, what is their feeling through the process? Because it's I'm starting to feel that, more traditional management structures or more progressive, like sociocracy and holacracy, I'm not sure if it's the structure that matters. I think it's the intent of the people involved. And if the people involved are embarked on this loving, caring, human learning journey, then the structure, I think, is almost irrelevant. Sometimes I wonder if we're even arguing about the wrong thing. It's not a pyramid versus circles. It's like, why are we here? I don't know. It's
it deals more with flow and fun. Talk about two topics we both like.
Yes.
And the engagement that you have with your colleagues and with the topics you are working on. And there you basically need to foster what we call in Zijnsgeoriënteerd a middle position. So you can be too attached or you can be too detached. And the most wise position is somewhere in the middle, where you are engaged, but not too deeply, where it doesn't become vital and an identity or power part topic, but it is something that you just feel engaged in. So when you see that people are too attached, it should be a warning sign. So why is he too attached? Because you make yourself very vulnerable, or you transcend the vulnerabilities of others when you are too attached. And the same with being too detached.
Well, I guess from a leadership management perspective, the necessary intent there is to be curious and interested. and be aware of what's happening with these people and actually invest time there.
Yeah.
Wow, fun conversation. So were there 2 or 3 key points that you think emerged from the conversation, Gerphil? What, like, trying to summarize a little bit for people, like, okay, how can we make this actionable?
Well, to summarize it, we started with the key requirements of social support and influence and autonomy. Both are key requirements for people to work in a productive but also in a happy way. We also talked about being aware of being too attached or too detached, or being highly emotionally involved in a positive or in a negative sense. Positive and negatives between quotes. And I think that those are especially important in environments where creativity, change, highly abstract things are the most dominant part of the work.
Yeah, we also touched on maybe the best thing people can do is just, I would say, without judgment, go talk to someone if they feel that somebody needs to share, and be curious, and also be respectful and keep it obviously confidential to create that safe space.
Absolutely. If you cannot do that with your direct peers or with your direct manager, leader, or whatever, there should be somebody else to be able to do that. I would say every company would need a coach, more or less, to be there for employees.
Well, I would say that, well, absolutely. I think my management style is very coaching anyways, but if a manager doesn't have that as a natural style, then get it somewhere else. Like, bring a coach in, provide that some way,
Yeah,
I think they're very human.
Also in the relationship then between the manager and the team member, that could also be useful also for the manager to be learning in this respect.
Love it. So, Gerphil, thank you so much. And I'll put in the show notes the link. Your website is essentialwaves.nl, and you're operating in still, I call it life coaching, but around burnout, ADD, connecting to the true capital S self source. It's great stuff. And thank you for that. And I would bring it also back to Movember, looking at my mustache. If you're if you're listening and you're so inspired to follow the link and donate, either to me or someone else who's growing their mustache or doing their Mo run or their Mo events this month, then go for it. But if you're not inspired to do that, then just be aware at work or at home, and reach out and check with honest human curiosity. How are they? And have that conversation, and maybe you'll make that person's day. Maybe that can be that shift that person needs to start to find themselves again. So that's our challenge and invitation to you during Movember. So Gerphil, thanks so much.
You're welcome, and a lot of success with Movember and Ebullient.
Thank you for listening. Download the Simplicity Toolkit from ebullient.com to discover the power of the Simplicity Scan and Sprint. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite player.